raise a spoon to Grandma, who always took all the hungry cousins to McDonald's for McNuggets and the Play Slide. Have something sweet in her honor. Come to McDonald's and treat yourself to the Grandma McFlurry today. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. At participating McDonald's for a limited time.
Welcome to Education in Focus. I'm your host, Eliana Kernodle. As school board candidates run and win on more conservative-leaning platforms promising public school reforms, alternatives to traditional school board member associations have launched in states like Virginia and Pennsylvania in an attempt to redefine the role. Joining me to tell us more is Chalkboard News editor Brendan Clary. Brendan, I realized as I was reading your piece on this that I don't actually know what school board associations are, so for my sake and any listeners who might be in the same boat, can you give us an outline of what the traditional school board associations are and what they do?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think I get really caught up in K-12 stuff, and you start getting into the weeds, and then you kind of have to come out of it and be like, okay, not everybody knows a lot of some of this stuff and how things work. So that's a great question. So essentially, school board members are they're elected officials at their local level, and they will be on the ballot and voted in. And in a number of states, they're allowed to be partisan, right? They're allowed to say I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat. And so there's some of those kinds of factors at play, right? And once you're elected, you have these school board associations. And these are usually, I think, in all states or in the majority of states. There's also some national school board member associations. And essentially, they will advocate for public schools generally. And so that's sort of their broader vision is we're advocating for public school funding and sort of a voice for school board members across the state or across a region, but usually a state. They also will do things like policy writing or model policy. So in Montana, for example, I was writing a lot about or looking into some of the policies of one particular school district. And they have similar policies to a number of other school districts because it's a member of the Montana School Board Association. So they have a model policy. And so that's a big thing that these school board associations will offer, right? Is some of that, if you're curious about is this legal, they would have a lawyer check that out and make sure that it's compliant with state and federal law, for example. So somebody who would know that and be able to provide guidance and give you that kind of information. Also trainings, right? Of this is what you're allowed to do by law. This is what sort of your role and your limits. And that kind of gets us into what I wrote about, right, is some of those trainings and some of those different services and stuff. So it is a broad range of things, but usually to help those elected officials do their job well, right, and sort of have that training. And that can, I think, look different for there's services provided to a school district on behalf of a board or for the board in terms of the policy writing services or those different kinds of services. And then there's also training for the individual members.
So then are these private organizations or established by states, or how does that work?
Yeah, that's a good question. And most states, I think these are private associations, which are usually paid with that, taxpayer dollars because school boards will contract with them, or have a contract with them to say here is, what we're paying for your services every month or every year, and so we can get some of these benefits, and that's just the cost of doing business, and that's fine, right? That you're getting some services from this organization, for your school board members.
And you wrote about Virginia and Pennsylvania where people have started alternative associations. Can you tell us more about those? Who started them and why?
Yes. So I talked to a couple of different people who have started alternative school board associations because they were school board members themselves, and they were getting the traditional training from the traditional school board associations. In Pennsylvania, they're called school directors, I believe. So there's a school directors association there. So just different terminology for different states, it's just the joy of being in America. And these school board members, school directors, they were hey, we are getting this training, and it's very confining of this is what you don't do to get into trouble. This is what a school board can't do. So you need to follow the law. And they both mentioned that at times it felt like they were rubber stamping. The superintendent would come up with a plan and they would just say, yes, we'll do it. And that if you said no or asked questions, then you would be kind of viewed as a bad school board member. But they're saying, look, we were elected as conservative members, as this is what our platform was. This is what we were trying to do as a school board member. So how do we take the role of school board member and expand it to be more of in line with what state law would allow. So then, and so instead of saying, okay, what can't we do? Like, what shouldn't we do to like make sure that like we're not getting in the way of the school? What do we do to positively affirm the role of a school board member as required by state law or like as laid out in state law? So Sherry Story for the School Board Member Association of Virginia, which is a relatively new organization. I think they started just a few years ago. They basically have said, okay, we have like these broad oversight rules based on Virginia's laws. How do we apply them and turn the role into like an oversight role of saying like, okay, like you're saying that student achievement is going up, but can I see the reports and the data? I would like to know. And so saying like, because I'm an elected official who got the people to back me because they want to see change, like how do you implement that? How do you get in there and say like, this is about student achievement, but you need to tell me what I want to know because I have this position, right? So sort of flipping on its head the traditional idea of just like going up there and saying like, yeah, I'm okay with this. You know, let's make sure that things are sort of running smoothly. And instead saying like, oh, we have like the long-term stuff in focus and we're thinking about what's coming down the road, 5-10 years from now. And then also like, how do we keep things accountable? How do we do this? And then Christina Brusalis in Pennsylvania, same kind of thing. Like, how do you help these school board directors figure out the best way to hold their school systems accountable and how to ask these kinds of questions? Because ultimately, if something happens with the superintendent, as Brusalis pointed out, something happens with the superintendent, then they can point to the school board and say, well, they didn't let me, X, Y, Z. It was their fault, right? So where does the buck stop? And if it stops with you, then do you have that role and that ability to say, like, we're going to keep the focus on student achievement and on like positive developments as you see them, right? And like, shouldn't you be doing that? So in the Pennsylvania one, that's very interesting. To be a part of that is free. Like they have donors who have allowed that training to be provided for free. So.
And has this led to any conflicts or trouble among school boards or in states?
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been kind of contentious, and Sherry Story was mentioning there's, you start saying like, hey, we're not just going to rubber stamp this. You have pushback from superintendents, like so at that local level, you have pushback from superintendents and staff saying like, you don't trust us. You're trying to create contention. You're trying to do that kind of stuff. And so she's like, sadly, that's the norm, and it shouldn't be, right? We should be able to say like, okay, we can ask these kind of questions and not have it feel like we're trying to say anybody's like, it's like if you have she used the analogy of like, if you're an employer and you ask your employee, like, can you get me the reports for this? Or like, can you show me how well you're doing? Then that's like sort of a natural thing, right? But if you ask a superintendent to say, can you show me how well you're doing? And they get very defensive about it, then like she just kind of said, what's the issue, right? Like, why do we have that sort of, connotation with it? And there's also been some different kinds of conflicts, as I think you mentioned, like between the state school board associations, right, who are seeing this and they're like, this is not great. Like in Pennsylvania, for example, the General Assembly recently passed a law that would limit what school board members, where they can get their information from, basically, so that they could only use one provider, I believe. And I don't think so that wouldn't explicitly ban the Alternative Pennsylvania group, but I think it would in a lot of instances potentially. And basically their argument to that is like, it's better to have more information than less information. And I couldn't really get into that much in the piece, but that is just like a very interesting sort of, thing with that, right? So it's a big question that is going to have to get answered in these differences. Texas also has like a new conservative school board association.
Well, Brendan, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at chalkboardnews.com.
Raise a spoon to Grandma, who always took all the hungry cousins to McDonald's for McNuggets and the Play Slide. Have something sweet in her honor. Come to McDonald's and treat yourself to the Grandma McFlurry today. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. At participating McDonald's for a limited time.